Hi guys, I want to cover a very important topic on reliably producing messages into Cloud PubSub in a controlled way, right? So this is an example that I put together to, it's just basically a simple PubSub producer. It generates a very simple message, just one liner, right? This is to make sure it does the least amount of compute. Then it just basically generates the messages and have a bunch of settings and send it to PubSub. There are a number of important things here. So if you think about, especially if you've been using PubSub for a while, have you actually had situations where sometimes you think, oh, why have I lost some messages? Where have these messages gone? Or do you have situations where you have a downstream system that cannot scale very well, then you need to control how much messages flows into the downstream systems? So in those scenarios, and that's where things need to be optimized between batching and control flow. So let's talk about message loss first, right? So this is something definitely I have seen before. It seems things have been optimized a bit better, especially if your network capacity is better. This happens a lot less often, but I definitely saw this happening before. So I don't know if you know, but in this publish flow control, right? If you haven't used this before, what this does is it gives you a way to control the flow of the messages from your producer into, when you produce the messages into the PubSub message queue. But there are some issues with this thing. You can see I put an exclamation mark on this limit exceeded behavior thing. So what happens is by default, when you set up your PubSub client, you put batch settings in, you put publisher options in. If you don't put it in, it uses the default option. The problem with the default option is in this publish flow control, the first two is okay, right? But the third one, this limit exceeded behavior, if you actually look at the source code, I've just checked this is the latest version of the PubSub producer as of today. You can see that the limit exceeded behavior, the default option is still set to ignore. So right, if you look at the source code, you can see it in here as well, right? The default is set to ignore. So what this means is if the flow control is exceeded, then it basically ignores whatever that is happening, right? It won't control the flow. So if you have any network issues and things got cut, basically your all of your messages would be lost. I definitely saw this myself. The other thing is if you want to control the flow of the messages, right, you also need to make sure this is set in a way that it has to be, rather than setting it to ignore, you set it to block, right? You can set it to error as well, right? That's the three options you have. But I typically set it to block because block basically means if you exceed the limit you set, right? In this particular case, the message limit or the byte limit, right? Then it will basically wait, right? It won't try to just swarm all of the messages into the message queue. It will wait, right? And based on the rate and the batch size and all of the stuff you set. So, and that is very important because by setting it to block, first of all, you eliminate the chance of losing any messages, because if it doesn't have enough capacity, it's not enough memory, or the network has capacity problems, it literally won't send as much, right? It will just block it. The other thing is the second point I mentioned. If you have a downstream consumer that consume the messages you send to this new topic, and that is where you can use the block with a combination of message limit and byte limit. You can make it flow a lot slower than the default. So this can help in different kind of scenarios, and you can adjust the batch settings and the flow controls to satisfy exactly how you want it to be. But the most important thing here is this block. So I'm just going to show you what it looks like, right? If I change it to ignore, right? So this setting, keep in mind, I've made it specifically to trigger this kind of scenario. The default is actually a lot higher with the message limits and the byte limit. So I've deliberately reduced it to show you what can happen in these scenarios. So if I run this thing, right? So you can see now it's producing 10,000 messages to the message queue. You can see it took 4 seconds. And this is the default behavior when it's set to ignore. But if I change it to block, right? Because this is already over my flow. This is way too fast, right? But if I set it to block, and then if I try this again, so it was like 4 point something seconds. Right now, is 13 seconds. So this is deliberately having a way for you to control the flow of the messages. And just to summarize, on one side, it actually makes sure you don't lose messages in the issues when you have network issues, memory issues, right? The other thing is it can control the flow to your downstream workers. So if you don't want that many messages to flow to the downstream, then you can actually block it and then set based on the limits of the message and the bytes to kind of restrict the volume, right? Okay, hope that's useful. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.